Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today I wanted to work on this track. It's not quite finished yet, it's called Journaling, and there's a lot that I need to improve. So I wanted to take a moment to go in and just work on some stuff and develop the ideas, show you what I would do to take a track from kind of done to like, I think that's done now. So that's the aim for this video, and finishing this tune and getting it out there. Okay, so I'm noticing a few things here. It drops in a really weird place. The intro's not interesting enough. It's super squashed. I'm looking at this dynamics meter and the whole thing is just crushed. Let's see what's here. So what I really want is a little bit of movement to it. So it feels like it's ripping and moving. And I'd like to be able to modulate those gains. That would be really cool. Yeah, that's a bit nice. That's pretty cool to add this extra little harmonic in. But notice there's a fundamental here, which is like the big sub of the bass, taking out a little bit of the second harmonic for a bit more clarity, and then adding a bit of third harmonic for some presence. But the bass is still just a pancake. It doesn't feel dynamic. So with this talking bass, maybe I'll just draw in the gain. I think this is quite nice, adding in the dynamics manually, because it does feel like it moves a bit more now. You hear this one feels like it's got movement, and if you look at this meter, you can see it's back into the yellow and green. Actually has dynamics. I think I could still do it more. See how that works with the drums. Pretty cool. I wish those top bits would just rip out a little bit more. The more I push things, the more the dynamics I lose. So let me bring this back maybe just on the output. Okay, that's pretty good. You can see we're getting back into green for dynamics, which is where I want to be, where stuff is actually moving and it feels like it's a bit cool. Check out mattchapmanaudio.com for mixing and mastering, one-to-one music production blogs, and exclusive content in the store. That's mattchapmanaudio.com. Let's see what this top pattern does. This just needs to be louder, because that's kind of like the top rip of the bass. I think I've got a little idea. We could also bring some dynamics back by just having a stop in the bass as well. Maybe I'm turning into an old man. I'm like, oh, I just want a bit more dynamics now. But when I listen to stuff with dynamics, I'm like, oh, I can listen to this for hours. When I listen to stuff that's super squashed, I'm like, oh, I only want to listen to like 4 minutes and then I'm done, you know? Yeah, that's nice. Now there's kind of like some movement and some talking there. Right, what's this sound? Oh, that's super cool. It feels like this snare doesn't have any attack. Yeah, of these bits. But I think I'm gonna have to get in with Shaper Box just to lock in some of that stuff. Yeah, I quite like that. And I think there's a way to copy these waves over, because I don't want to draw them every time. Wave, copy wave, there you go. Now I can start playing about with this on the mid-range now. So this is before and after. I think that's pretty cool, but I like that wildness and that character, so I'm going to go to like 80%. Doing that multi-band enveloping can be a really good way to just like get a snare that's kind of just wild, put that under control a little bit. The only thing I'm seeing now is that the kick drum is so squashed. Multiplicity is really good for this. Have it so that when the kick drum happens, it'll just pump it up just a little bit. But I just think it sounds better anyway, and now it matches the snare a little bit more. I think the snare might be a bit too loud. Nice, let's sit that with the bass and see what happens. Yeah, I'm quite liking that. I'd like to make it a bit wider overall. So this plugin, I'm just taking away some of the central stuff, the mid, and just pushing it into the sides a little bit. That sounds pretty cool. I don't feel like my snare has any chunky knock to it. I'm thinking about pulling up a serum and synthesizing and get that sound. So the way I'd start a snare drum is I don't want any randomness because I want it to be a bit more consistent in this particular instance. And then I just want a sine wave. So I'm going to delete all these and just sine, and that'll be good for me. And I've got the sine wave there. First thing I'm going to do is put an envelope on the pitch and have that go just high to low. It's just unipolar. And then just going to make a little pitch envelope here. You see it keeps looping round. I just want envelope. The pitch, I just want it to play back the same pitch no matter where I play on the keyboard. So you might have to pitch it up. So I've pitched it up 4 octaves, and I want quite a high pitched snare. And I also want it to be really, really short. So I'm going to change all of these values to BPMs, and I'm going to have its attack ultra fast, no sustain, and I want it to be done within an 8th note, and like an incredibly quick release. That's pretty cool. Pattern out a couple of those so I don't have to keep playing the keyboard. Got a little click because my release is too fast. 1, 2, 8, that's giving me a nice clean tail. And I'm just going to bring that in. And this envelope 1, that's the amplitude envelope. And then this envelope over here, LFO1, is my pitch. I'm going to make that the same. If this is 1/8, I'm going to make this 1/8. I actually want this pitch envelope to be much quicker. Yeah, that's pretty good. Just going to add a little bit of gain for a moment. Because I want to see where the pitch of the other snare is. This looks about like G5. I want to get the same. Because I can't go any higher on this, I can load in a waveform like that where it can just be higher pitched. Because I can't go any higher on the octaves, and I'd like to get a little bit more out of it. Sometimes I do a second pitch envelope that's really quick. Once again, LFO2 to the pitch, and I'm going to do this quite high to add a very quick ramp. And that can give it some brightness at the beginning. At the minute it's way too much because it's got this really high thing. If I just bring it down a bit, I know that's very subtle, this envelope. If I bypass it, it just does something to strengthen the attack for me that I like. Yeah, that's really good. And it's really subtle. And sometimes I'll put 2 or 3 pitch envelopes just to get it fine-tuned. Bring this back a touch, and I can just play about with that till I've found a pitch envelope that I really like. It doesn't have too much tops, but it does feel like it hits nicely at the beginning. That's pretty good. The next thing that I like to experiment with is distortion, but only on the attack of the snare. So I'm going to create a completely different one so I can map it again. But this time I'm going to just drive the attack of the snare so you can make it feel like the attack really hits hard, but the body's quite clean. Overdrive could work with less. I would say that that's the body of the snare. So I'm actually going to save this now. So I'll put that in my March sample pack for my website, just as a little starting body for the snare. And then on top of that, you're going to want some sort of character. So I'm actually going to look in the sample library of the factory ones, and normally a classic 909 will be pretty good. That's pretty good for what I want to do with the snare. Draw a different envelope on this one where it doesn't open and ruin the attack that I just made. So it's still going to be a 1/8 long, but it's going to take a moment to come in. So you get that bright attack first, and then this one just comes in to sit with it. Yeah, I don't mind that. And then I might do a final one and have C and noise go to filter 1 so that I can filter these up. And that I might just do this one again. Copy, just paste this over. But this time this one's going to be an octave up to get a bit more body out of it. And it's going to be filtered as well, so you don't get that really bright sound, which I didn't want. And then add some noise. And I do like to send that to the envelope as well, because this is just a layer. And I think that's pretty good, to be honest. I'll put it under the other one and see, without. And hopefully you can hear that's now got a little bit of attack to it. But I'm also going to use a shaper box so that this kind of baggy, loose snare, the main snare, kind of gets out of the way of this new one. So I'm just going to input on 28 more snare layers. Yeah, and I can just have that attack. I think we've got more of a defined, clean attack now that adds some whack in something, but it doesn't feel like just a blurry mess of snare now, which is quite cool. Let's bring up this. I just forgot to have a little look at what's going on. Add the dynameter, which I really like to keep an eye on. That's good. That's got enough dynamics. With the other stuff, it'll be pretty cool. Now this one doesn't feel like it has that bright push that I'm looking for, so maybe we could put in a bit of top end. just so it cuts through. I like this Class B for transients. Now it sounds like it's got a whip to it. I'll take that out. Yeah, I think that's sounding pretty cool to me. And it might be nice to do a final layer of snare, which is from Addictive Drummer or something similar to that, crackle and sizzle. But I'm not going to make this from scratch, just for time, because in the past, I think I've made a rack already called Addictive Drums Smash or something like that, because I like loading up these instrument racks where you've kind of done all the work in the past and you don't have to set it all up again. So let's see what this snare will sound like, just for out of the box of this kit. Let's just try a snare here. Okay, so this is what we've got from Addictive Drummer. Just a little cajon sound, but then we'll add some mid-range EQ just to clean out any mud. A little wave shaper. Oof, that's working well for me. Digitalis for some wildness. That removes quite a lot of top though, so I might just bring that back a bit. Just 50% for some chaos. I quite like it, but it's got a bit too much room for me. But it's just not quite there yet. That does add a lot of good stuff though. That's quite cool. Okay, so I am noticing this interfering with the attack. So I'm just on the front of this, just taking out the finest little bit, kind of the produced snare can really come through at the beginning, and it doesn't feel like a bright transient attack, it feels like a knock, and then the tail comes in. Maybe I can make this a bit brighter. That's quite nice now. Okay. This is pretty great, this thing. I just want this drum groove to not interfere with that snare either. Now let's just check this drum group. And I just want to see how hot these whole drums are overall. So it's pretty good, but the snare is definitely causing clipping now. With all those layers together. So maybe this is a time just to clip the group. Okay, that's pretty cool. But we've got the snare to a point now where it's not clipping and the drums are relatively dynamic and consistent, which is really cool. Trying to save these for my March sample pack. So you should be able to use that if you get the March sample pack. Check out mattchapmanaudio.com for mixing and mastering, one-to-one music production blogs, and exclusive content in the store. That's mattchapmanaudio.com. Now I want to do the same work on the kick drum. So at the minute, we've got this great whoomp into the kick, which is quite cool. But it'd be nice if the kick just had a knock to it. And having this will also be good to make something to sidechain all the other stuff. Okay, let's do the kick. I think I've got a preset. He says, famous last words, I think I've got a preset for this. See how that sounds. Not ideal. I'm actually happy with the kick already. I just want a really fast attack. So I'm going to come in with this envelope and just really shorten that up. That's what I wanted. Yeah, that's great. That's going to be just my little kick attack. Helpful if they're the same pattern. Yeah, that's way better. The drums are starting to come together. Yeah, that's pretty great. It's not really clipping, but just the drums are nice and level now between the kick and the snare. They've got kind of good attack, I think. So yeah, that's that kind of the drums. And I think that's looking pretty good now. But obviously I have a bit of a nightmare when this pattern ends. I've got to fix a different bit, but we'll see how that goes in a moment. So both these layers that I made don't make sense with this new snare, which is quite exciting. And I'm going to have to make it completely different to work with this one. Yeah, really happy with that. All right, we're getting somewhere now with this track. The next thing for me to do is look at getting the tops just right and getting some layers in for the brightness. But I'm pretty happy with how this one's going. So, and I had a few ideas. One of them was to add a little bit of triangle for the percussion for the tops, and the other one was just to add a moving hat. So that should be pretty cool to add to these sections. Nice. Okay, I'm pretty happy with that. But the one thing it's missing, and one thing I always think about top end is I'm like, oh, it needs to dance with the other stuff. So I like a bit of AM distortion just to hit when the kicks hit. Say for instance here, I've got this kick pattern. What I'll do on the top end is just have this distortion come in when the kick is in. And then it kind of feels like it dances with the other parts, which is what I'm really looking for, is that kind of movement. So we'll move this mix wheel with the kick. So each time a kick hits, for that part, we'll have the distortion in. Okay, so this shaker's pretty good, just coming through the mix just a little bit too much. So I'm gonna add one more filter, RX 950, it's like an old sampler one. Okay, this is almost there. It just needs one more automation, just so that it's not constant the whole time, because I feel like I can just hear it being not a real thing. Where the bass comes out, the shaker can maybe come out. And then like let it do a full reset there. Yeah, I just wanted that little bit of top end movement and something just a little. I'm going to even duck it down just a touch more. And I think that little attention to detail bits means that if you listen to a tune a few times, like later on, you're like, oh, I didn't hear that bit before, and so on and so on. So, right, that's the top end I wanted to add. That's cool. Okay, so we've got these two sections done. It's kind of drums, bass, and this little talking thing. But it might be nice if this came up just a touch in volume. I think it would be nice to have the snares coming across here. So we've got that in time now, hopefully. Okay, I think again, I'm going to need a different snare for this section because it doesn't seem to quite hit with this new layer. Yeah, I think it needs to just be a bit higher in this section. Yeah, that's pretty cool. And we'll have that with this sound, yeah. And then to this section. Okay, that's just a wall of noise, which I love. That's perfect. I'm not going to change that at all. But I do think we need the kicks to come across because the kick doesn't quite bang in. Got to get my dynamics meter up to see how that bit handles under pressure. I think this thing should duck for the kick a little bit though, or maybe it could distort for the kick. I'm not sure yet. Let's try. Paste it over here. Okay, I still do want the beep to come through really nicely. I want those samples to be like, you're like, what is happening? They're so loud. Just what? Like, that's how I want people to be like, why would he mix it that loud? That's wild, that kind of feeling. So maybe I just want a little bit of radiator and just put a bit of heat on that. Oof, that section's nice. Oof, and then straight into the pad. I'm also going to put just a little bit of heat. Not so much that it distorts. For this sound, I might just put a little bit of a really low filter. That bass is crazy. Okay, and we'll just take the kick drums over as well, so it hits a little bit harder. Okay, that snare sounds pretty nice, but it just needs these layers, I think. Okay, and the drums should actually end here with that kick, and they need the kick layer as well. Okay, that's pretty cool. And the last one just has an edit where it ends on the 1. Oof, that's very cool. I just checked this is actually on grid. I want that to be a bit further back in the mix. I think I'm going to give that one its own channel and just EQ down some of that harshness at 3. Nice, that's pretty cool. Yeah, I'm just worried about this having a tiny bit too much top end, so I'm going to put a filter freak on it just to roll off that super high. Yeah, that's pretty cool. We're getting somewhere with this. So now I think the next thing I really want to do is develop little bits of interest. So this is one thing I like to do, and I don't even listen to what's in there. I'll just put it on a channel and then put tons of effects on it. A delay, a Valhalla reverb, like maybe a sketch cassette. And I'll just kind of pick things at random. Maybe a digitalis in the middle. Okay, glitch wild, why not? There we go. So now I can have this sound and just see what's in there. Yeah, so I'm going to bounce and freeze this because I already really like how it sounds. And we'll just have a listen for the best bits. And that's kind of like a cool sound. Like, I don't even know what it is. Like, if you ask me, oh, where did you sample that from? I don't even know. And that's what I find super exciting. Check out mattchapmanaudio.com for mixing and mastering, one-to-one music production blogs, and exclusive content in the store. That's mattchapmanaudio.com. Maybe I could just have that talking at some point. Let me save this as a thing for the next month's sample pack. I'll take that out. Okay, I'm gonna do one more of these sample sounds. So I'll just chuck a whole bit down here. I just love that. That's like exactly what I'm looking for. And that could be the thing that I'm looking for my outro. Because I felt like the outro was missing something, so that could work there maybe. That's pretty cool. Let me try the space modulator on there. I'm loving those sounds. I think that's enough samples. All right, one thing I do like to do to check if my tune's gonna work or not is put a really heavy clipper on. And shout out to Bob Mack, who taught me about this. Got it from his blog, because you turn the output down, but you clip into something. So I'm just gonna do a regular hard clip. So you should be able to get it so it's the same volume as your tune approximately. I know I've clipped it way too hard, but the point of this is to hear what's going to distort and crumble first. And it's clear that my kick drum is the first thing to go wonky. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time just grouping these together just to see if there's anything in there that I can remove to make it sound cleaner when all of this limiting goes on. I'm going to take this off later, but see if I can clean up that kick a little bit. So that's the first thing I did. The second thing is I'm noticing that the snare doesn't really cut through on the basses, and I don't think I've sidechained that so that the snare ducks the basses. So let me just put a little shaper box just to get a little bit of room between those where that can come through. See if we can get that snare to just come through. And so now what I've got is this clipper, knowing that if my tune was to get limited really hard, suddenly the kick isn't going to cause loads of problems and stuff like that. Then I'll take it off and make sure that I haven't ruined the tune when it's just in its normal mode now. So I'm pretty happy, but I lost quite a lot of character in this kick. So I'm going to see if I can just bring that back a touch. Okay, so the next thing I need to check is the sides of the track to make sure that they're working. So I use this BX control. It's free, which is great. And I just listen through to the track in the sides to make sure there's not too little or too much of something in each element. Okay, so for me, that isn't quite right. What I'm hearing is that there's too much top brightness in the sides and not enough mid-weight to make it feel rich and full. Definitely going to look into these basses and try and fix those up a little bit. So let's see with this talking bass. So sometimes I use this plugin called Dr. MS, and what you can do is you can take a bit of a mid signal and put it in the sides. So just filter everything so I don't put any sub in the low end. And we've already got a lot of tops, so I don't need to reproduce that in the sides. And I can also just really gently filter some top end off of those sides as well. That's starting to sound really cool in the sides, not so harsh. And maybe I'm going to do a bit of sides EQ as well. Yeah, we'll do before and after. So this is the sides of this bass before and after. So just a little bit less piercing, a little bit more rich. That should be cool. And then we'll check this one as well. That one I like. It's just characterful. It's nice. Let's check the drums. Okay, so I think this one should have some stereo width as well. The serum punchy bit is not on there. It's just on the body of the kick to give that some energy. Yeah, this snare I think could have a bit more body in the sides. Yeah, it's all sounding pretty good to me actually. All right, I think that is kind of everything, to be honest. sweet. I think that's going to be what the tune is, to be honest. I wouldn't do much more to it. That's kind of what I envisioned for the track, which is quite cool. So yeah, I'm going to put this out on my Bandcamp and website. So if you want to get this tune, you can grab it there. I think it's going to be called Journaling. I hope that was pretty useful, or at least some helpful hints in there. If anybody's interested in me mixing or mastering your tunes, let me know. You can see a bit about my process here, how I kind of try and respect the tune, respect dynamics, and I try and make something that sounds really exciting to listen to. And if you're interested in that for your productions, let me know on my website. Happy to work for people for mixing and mastering. And also on my website, I'm doing one-to-one tutorials. So if you want to learn more about music production and you want to go a deep dive into any of these topics, once again, let me know. I hope that was helpful. That's it. Until next time. Nice one.